Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Black Orlando Tech's virtual workshop and tech story session. My name is Sophia Porter, and I am the Executive Director for Black Orlando Tech, aka BOT, and I am so excited to have you all joining us this evening. If you are new to BOT, we are so grateful to welcome you and to have you here with us. And for those that are returning, thank you so much for your continued support in our organization. As we're getting started and just waiting for more people to roll in, if everyone could leave their name, where you're from, and what industry you're currently a part of in the comments, that would be great. We'll just wait a couple, one more minute just to see if we can get some more traffic in here. So again, if you're new, please go ahead and put your name, where you're from, and the industry in your comments. Just in regards to housekeeping, you are more than welcome to ask questions or anything you would like to learn from today's speaker in the comment section, or anything you want to know about BOT. And we will answer those questions towards the end of the presentation today. So just to introduce everyone who are new, and just a reminder for those who are returning and supporting our organization, we are Black Orlando Tech. I'm Sophia Porter, the Executive Director for Black Orlando Tech, but we are a nonprofit that's located in Orlando, Florida. And we are focused on tech upskilling and tech entrepreneurship for tech-enabled startups and founders. And BOT was founded back in 2016 by Joshua Walker and Mike Felix, who both thrive to improve the economic growth for underserved communities by providing them with opportunities in the tech industries. And again, the way that we're doing that is with our upskilling programs and with our tech entrepreneurship, our startup accelerator program. So I'm very excited to introduce our speaker and presenter for tonight, um, Gabe Perez. So Gabe is a seasoned solution architect at Red Hat with a robust background in public service. They hold a bachelor's in political science and a master's in public administration. They also hold several different prestigious certifications, like the Red Hat Certified Engineer and the AWS Developer Associates. Beyond tech, Gabe is a passionate about mentoring and encouraging others to explore the careers in technology. And when off duty, they also love to travel and enjoy quality times with their loved one. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring them to the stage.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? All right. Cool. So, yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Gabe Perez, and I'm happy to see everybody here tonight. Welcome to the webinar, where we'll be really focusing on the power of mentorship, specifically through the lens of my personal journey, moving into the tech field from the world of public service. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it, starting with a look into Black Orlando Tech and the role that it plays in its community. I know Sophia just kind of covered it a little bit, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth there and throw my own twist into it with my journey. I also want to invite you guys to stay curious and ask any questions you might have about the presentation or your own journey. And if I don't get to answer your question, I encourage you to reach out to me directly. You'll be able to find my information available at the end of the presentation. All right. So BOT was founded back in 2016 by some passionate tech leaders who wanted to create an inclusive, safe space for people working in tech, and also who were aspiring to make the move into the tech field. Primarily, BOT uses grassroots and direct-to-community initiatives to help generate opportunities for people involved in and interested in learning about the industry. So some of the initiatives that BOT puts out include cultivating partnerships with businesses and academic, professional, and governmental organizations, facilitating safe dialogue and programming among underrepresented groups in tech pipelines, and further developing those same pipelines to leverage career and entrepreneurial resources throughout Central Florida. So two of BOT's programs that are certainly worth mentioning are its Tech Cohorts and its Tech Startup Series. The Tech Cohorts provide accelerated training opportunities that empower participants with introductory to intermediate level skills and technology. And a few years ago, I actually got to lead an Introduction to Cloud cohort alongside Joshua Walker, who is one of Bot's co-founders and who I will continue to shout out because he and his wife were significant mentors to me. So sup, Josh and Emily. And then you also have the Tech Startup Series, which is an entrepreneurial development program meant to equip participants with the skills that they need to launch a successful tech startup company. I'm very proud of the work that Bot is doing and grateful to still be working together with the awesome people that make it the force that it is. And just as a quick aside, if you hear any background noise, just consider it part of the presentation. It's just a little soundtrack for you guys. So a little bit more about myself. I've been working in different capacities with Bot for several years and am currently a solution architect with Red Hat. And before I got into tech, I lived basically another life in the world of public service, where I held different roles in the legal field, in sales, and in public organizations. And since I've made it into tech, I've gained a couple of certifications that have helped me progress along the path. And I'm going to go ahead and go into this in greater detail now. So I'm going to go ahead and take us back to late 2019, when I had just finished my year of training to become a union organizer, and I had just completed my master's in public administration as well. I had turned down an opportunity to move to Seattle to continue organizing because I didn't quite feel like it was the right fit. And I think we all remember that tiny, insignificant blip that started in early 2020. So like many people, I found myself in a tough position. I couldn't find work in the fields that I was in. The world was basically at a standstill. And I had no clue how I was going to keep things going if I was steadily losing momentum. So after some consideration, I decided that I was going to pursue a career in tech, which was all fine, well, and good. But this wasn't as easy as it sounds like it might have been. Tech is an incredibly broad field with a lot of nested pockets that get progressively more niche the further into the rabbit hole you go. And deciding what role to play in the field can be pretty daunting. So it was the first real hurdle that I faced personally. And this is the first thing that I actually want to highlight for you all. It may sound kind of redundant, but if you're considering or actively moving in toward a career in tech, take the time to do your research and really delve into it. Even if your vision evolves as you grow, the knowledge you gain from your research will go a long way because it'll help you set a North Star for you to focus on and keep you from straying too far from your path as you progress. So in a case like this, you want to set a goal, not a plan, because plans inevitably change and can create rigidity where flexibility is necessary. But a goal can be that North Star that allows for options and variations and fluidity along the way. And this is also a pretty good life tip too, if I can say so. So for example, when I got started, I was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of resources and information that I was finding on the internet and in my searches. Like I had no idea what the cloud was or that cybersecurity was comprised of such a wide array of subtopics and practices, or even that there were so many applications of web design and software development to explore. So I had no idea where to begin. But over time, as I researched tech roles more deeply and learned about their ins and outs before really applying myself, I started to recognize industry terms and feel more comfortable with envisioning myself in some of these roles. And I had originally intended to become a web developer turned software engineer, but little did I know my path would eventually lead me to work in the field of information technology, like using, manipulating, and spreading the use of big enterprise softwares as opposed to writing and building them. So now I'd like to focus on the next really important message here, which is about networking. And I'll explain my networking process from early on. So once I felt good about the research that I had done, I decided to start working with, or to start with web development, which many people who decide to go into tech from other fields often start with. And it seemed like the best way to get familiar with the inner workings of and the basics of prominent tech concepts. But I wondered, like, how am I really going to start now that I've picked this topic? Well, A friend of mine at the time who was a copywriter had mentioned that she had begun using this platform called Free Code Camp to learn the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for those of you who are not familiar, HTML is essentially the markup language that serves as the backbone of the internet that we know today. And CSS, or cascading style sheets, is the language often used to manage the presentation and style of a markup language like HTML. So a lot of those pretty structures and graphics you see on your favorite web pages are often built by this dynamic duo among a bunch of other tools. And if you're interested in web development, these are two languages you'll want to become very comfortable with. And I'll talk a little bit more about Free Code Camp and other really helpful resources that I used to launch onto this path in a little bit. But back to Free Code Camp, I started going through the free curriculum that the platform offered, and I was able to pick up some core concepts, but I eventually felt like I needed more guidance to hone in on my craft a little bit better. So the same person who'd put me onto Free Code Camp had brought up a WordPress convention that she had basically just recently attended for work, and she told me all about it. You know, she'd made a lot of helpful connections in there, and then she had suggested that I try basically going to a WordPress group meet myself. Now, at the time, I didn't know what WordPress was, and I was a little bit confused about how it might fit in with my own mission. But it actually turned out that WordPress is huge in the world of web content management. So I decided to give it a try, and I jumped on this application called Meetup, which definitely I'm going to keep shouting out. That's a really good one. And that's where I was able to find a WordPress group local to the Orlando area that would meet on a regular basis. And I really want to emphasize here too that this was my very first tech meetup and my first attempt at networking and building relationships in the tech world to try and create opportunities for myself. It would only be basically the first of many attempts. So I'll keep coming back to that. So when I got to the WordPress meetup, I was surprised at the willingness of many of the people that I had met there to help and point me in the right direction. And even though I didn't end up going too deep into WordPress territory that day, or even later on in my journey, I actually did meet one gentleman who mentioned Black Orlando Tech. And I thought to myself, wow, what a super cool concept. You know, I've got to really connect with that organization at some point, but that was basically it. And I left that as, as a mental note to be reviewed and revisited later. And remember this if you can, because there's a pretty funny turnaround there. But yeah, I was so impressed with the experience that I'd had at that first meetup that I jumped right back on the app that day and decided to register for as many local tech meetups that I could find, which I also encourage people to do to get themselves really out there into the scene. But one of those meetups that I found was a Women in Tech event that was happening the following week. So I just want to note that this Women in Tech event would have been about my third or even fourth attempt at networking and connecting with local industry professionals, just to continue to emphasize that it was an involved, intentional effort that I had to make to create and foster these relationships throughout. Now, during the Women in Tech event, there were 3 female panelists offering different, very useful insights into their experiences as women in tech, which many of us know is a male-dominated industry. And funny enough, once the panelists had finished speaking and the networking portion of the event had begun, one of them came up to me and started chatting with me. And several minutes into our conversation, a man came up and stood next to her and immediately chimed in and said something along the lines of, oh no, big data is where it's at. That's the place to start. Cloud computing is it right now. And well, it turned out that those 2 people ended up being Emily and Joshua Walker, who would become my very first mentors and just happened to be on the board with Black Orlando Tech. So I just happened to run into bot people that day simply because I decided to show up. And that's sometimes the most important thing you can do is show up, because you never know who you're going to meet. But at any rate, long story short, the amazing team behind Bot took me under its wing and would serve really as the kind of like the central rocket booster to my tech transition, with Josh serving as my primary mentor. So now you may be wondering why there's a timeline at the top of the slide. Well, it really represents my employment journey from the end of my time as a union organizer to the start of my career as a solution architect with Red Hat. And the message that I'm highlighting now is that persistence is crucial. And this might sound a little bit, sentimental, but I really want to highlight this. I also wanted to provide transparency here to show that the process of moving into tech was not linear. It was not quick, and it required several detours to really manifest properly. I know that's not what people want to hear, but it's true, and I'm not showing this to really scare anyone away from embarking on the journey of integrating themselves into the industry, but to be really kind of open about the fact that it oftentimes isn't a speedy solution. So whether you approach your journey by DIYing it or going back to school or attending a boot camp, it's a commitment that requires persistent effort and attention, like anything else that's worthwhile, basically. And I'll share with you what the moves were, both professionally and physically, that I had to make to get to where I am now. So to get into the details a little bit more of this timeline, I'll start with my first tech job as a field support technician. By the time I had landed this job, I had worked extensively on my own with Josh and Bot's guidance to study and practice project building and certification acquisition like it was basically my full-time job. And that's because it kind of was. I had been unemployed because of the pandemic for over a year, and I'd spent that time essentially balancing between building portfolio projects and pushing them up into GitHub for display, and studying for certification exams like those for the Amazon Web Services Certified Cloud Practitioner and Developer Associate certifications. And truthfully, as a beginner, those projects and certifications served more as indications of persistence, willingness to learn, and grit more than they really showed technical aptitude, which was good still. But did it mean that because I had put some projects on display and gotten some certifications under my belt that I was going to be swept up by a large, well-established corporate company to start working right away? Well, no, and it usually doesn't happen that way. In fact, in my first tech role, I spent time plugging and unplugging desktop systems in clinical settings and basically taking apart old computer hardware. And that was okay because the job provided solid foundational skills that I would later use to support my understanding of much more complex technologies. And you'll see this in a lot of cases where people move from other professions into tech. Many of them will start in supportive roles like these. And when you're in it, it may seem or feel like you're starting from zero, but it is ultimately fundamental. And, looking back at that timeline, check out that little retail blip up there. So I worked retail after being a field support technician because it was, again, an unprecedented time. So I had to improvise. And the reason I share this is because this is where self-motivation and mentorship and persistence really matter. So because making a career change like this is not linear, you can expect to encounter moments that feel like setbacks. What's important is that you continue to really follow that North Star that you set at the start of your journey, and that you use your resources to help stay on track. For example, in the time between opportunities, I had begun working more closely with Bot to gain relevant experience and exposure, and to help it further its goals as well. I became more involved. I was co-leading some tech cohorts and supporting its organizational initiatives. So no matter what was going on the back end, I made sure that I was still showing up and fostering those network connections and not allowing what felt like a really tough time or really tough moments to take my focus away from the goal that I had set, which was to make it into the corporate IT setting. And of course, everyone's goals will look differently or will look slightly different, and that's perfectly okay. But I want to go back to networking real quick because I want to emphasize that I was able to move into my first IT role as a field support technician because of the connections that I had made through and with Bot. So I was able to leverage the relationships that Bot had built with local businesses and hiring entities to really take that first step. So learning to tap into the power of your network and fostering those relationships with your mentors and people who basically want to advocate on your behalf is absolutely essential and should not be understated. Really want to highlight that. And in fact, it was because of the bot community that I met my second significant mentor, Roderick Heron, who would eventually help open the door for me at Red Hat. So now you might be a little bit surprised to hear that once the Red Hat opportunity arose, I felt completely underprepared, despite all of the work that I had done to get myself to the point that I could feel confident about reaching for an opportunity like that. And it's no secret that many people starting out in tech often feel pretty inadequate outright, or like their skill set isn't enough to get them from points A to B. But it's really important to remember that what you know, not everyone knows. So, once you get some knowledge under your belt, you become the new teacher to a newbie who is in the place that you were in just a short while ago. So what you know is valid. And even if you aren't an expert, and even if you haven't quite reached, the goal that you'd set, it's still worth sharing. There's always an opportunity to pay it forward and to share your talent. And I encourage you to basically do the opposite when you feel discouraged by the idea that working in tech is an intimidating feat. I encourage you to do the thing anyway, apply anyway, interview anyway, share the project anyway, show up anyway, because you never know what opportunities are waiting for you. So for example, Roderick one day sent me a message with a link, and he said, "I want you to apply for this position." And I was just thinking in my head, I have no idea what this is, or what you see in me to be worthy of a role like this at this point where I'm at, but I'm going to do it, And of course, I didn't say that out loud, but I was already feeling the pressure of the imposter syndrome, so much so that I did end up kind of pushing back a little bit. I told Roderick, "I'll apply, but just as soon as I get this one last little certification to impress them with. I just need a couple days. I'm just going to put my head down and get it done at lightning speed." And thankfully, Roderick had been the kind of mentor who could see my efforts and potential for what they were. And he insisted that I apply without that other certification. I was so convinced that I needed to be the ideal candidate. So he helped me really sharpen up my resume and my interviewing skills. And then he said, go for it. And he ended up being right. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so what ended up happening was that he was able to advocate for me and for my character and for my willingness to learn on my behalf to the person who would ultimately decide to give me my first interview there. And once I had been chosen for the job, I accepted it on the condition that I had to relocate to Raleigh. And because that was the final step in bringing the opportunity to fruition and basically meeting the moment, that's what I did. Now, I like to say that cliches are cliches for reasons, and I mention all of that to remind you that showing up, even when you're scared or intimidated, can take you far beyond what limited visions you might be imagining for yourself when you're laser focused on just making it. So I wanted to really emphasize that. So by the time I'd met Roderick, I'd already worked extensively on my own with Josh and Bot's help and guidance, of course, on building a really strong portfolio of projects and certifications that I could show and explain to him and potential employers as well. And what my mentors, ultimately did was provide exactly the guidance that I needed to prepare for the next round of opportunities. Roderick and Josh had helped me to really refine, my resume and determine which projects and personal accomplishments to highlight. But of course, they didn't do the work for me. I had to put some stuff up to actually get in. So how did I go about building a portfolio? Well, give me a second here. So, it really started with Free Code Camp, like I'd mentioned before. And on this slide is a screenshot of the very first project in their responsive web design course, which is free, along with a whole list of other incredibly engaging and useful courses that they offer. This is how I got started, though, by following these prompts, building progressively more challenging projects over time, and publishing my completed work in GitHub for easy viewing. It was through this resource that I learned the HTML and CSS basics that I would actually later use to build my my own portfolio webpage that I hosted on the internet through my Amazon Web Services account. And as an example, the process that I went through to build, publish, and host a personal portfolio page was actually an excellent project for me to walk through with prospective employers and really any interested party. But this is not the only resource out there. Of course, the internet is a big place, if we can call it a place. I really can't understate how essential Reddit was to my journey. And some of you guys out there might be huge Reddit fans already. I totally understand and I can relate. There's just so many people on Reddit looking for the same or similar tech resources and answers, that you might be, and they certainly, were for what I was looking for. And that, along with mentor guidance, really kind of supplemented the important decisions that I made on how to proceed. And it was basically through Reddit and similar platforms that I was able to get extremely specific and selective about the types of resources that I wanted to use to learn, especially when it came for studying for exams. The tech communities that live on Reddit are full of newbies and long-term professionals alike, and many of them are ready to answer questions candidly on a range of topics. And I also learned that many people in the Reddit threads were flocking to Udemy, which is another crucial resource in my personal journey. And they were going there to purchase preparation courses, specifically for certification exams. And although Udemy is a platform where professionals sell their courses at a charge, many times Udemy would run these sales that would bring the course prices down from, say, $120 to like $12, which made them way more accessible. So I'll give you an example. On Udemy, I discovered these legitimate courses and practice exams that I'd learned from and basically used to help me pass the Amazon Web Services Certified Cloud Practitioner and Developer Associate exams, and the CompTIA Security Plus exam, among several others. And this is not, a low-key plug for Udemy or Reddit or any other of the, resources that I'm sharing with you, but rather it's me showing you that there are so many options out there, and many of them are free or low cost, and they will certainly do the job of setting you up for success, whatever your goal is. So as I went on exploring these resources and learning more deeply, I began to understand more demanding topics, and I was able to move on from HTML and CSS, for example, to Python, which is one of the most ubiquitous, popular programming languages in the field right now. And I'm specifically talking about Python because once I felt like I'd gotten to a pretty comfortable place with web development basics, I wanted to learn how to build projects with more complexity. I didn't want to go from 0 to 100 if I was going to dive into a substantial programming language like Python. So I started out, with a book, and that's how I really kind of dipped my toe into the world of Python and more intense programming languages, and then from there I progressed to free YouTube content, where I was able to take advantage of some free project courses that I had found. And then I also decided to move on to Udemy after that, where I ended up finding the course that would ultimately guide me through most of my showcased Python projects, which, by the way, building projects from tutorial courses is not only one of the best ways to learn and really digest what you're practicing, but it's also a totally valid way to create your projects. I think when I was building my projects, I kind of felt like an imposter or like I was cheating, for building programs alongside someone else's demos. But I quickly learned that that was the best way to retain these new concepts, and that any of the work that you do and the projects that you create are worth sharing if you want your effort to be recognized. At the very least, they will convey your effort and your commitment to the mission, which is basically learning. And that's not something you ever want to stop, even once you get into the field. And so with your projects and your certifications complete, your mentors giving you the thumbs up, and your programming knowledge sharp, even at the beginner level, you will have developed a solid foundation to support you on your journey into the industry. Now, I wanted to share with you some examples of one of my own projects or some of my projects that I thoroughly enjoyed building. So this is a screenshot of the portfolio webpage that I had built for myself back in the day. And what you're seeing is this in the screenshot specifically is an example of HTML. You know, it's not perfect, but it's certainly got the job done. And when I combine this work with the styling capabilities of CSS, which I haven't shown here because I just ran out of room, I was able to create a somewhat responsive web page experience where I posted my story, my most important links like LinkedIn and my contact information, and also my project examples, all to increase visibility into my work and just my journey in general. And this may look kind of like a jumbled mess of numbers and letters, but it's actually quite easy to learn with the right tools and pace and practice. HTML and other markup languages similar to it are a little bit simpler to navigate, in my opinion, usually, which is why many people begin their tech journeys by kind of tinkering with something like it, or like XML, and then incorporating other elements like CSS, Bootstrap capabilities, and even a little bit of JavaScript into their projects. I will say though, once you start messing with something like JavaScript, you are going into more complex territory, but there are so many languages out there to choose from. You know, this is just a comfortable starting place for those who are interested in understanding how websites work and why they look the way they do, essentially. So speaking of complexity, here is an example of the Hangman game. Is this the Hangman game? I think it is, yes, that I built a couple years ago. The game is built entirely in Python programming language, which, like I had mentioned before, is one of the least complex programming languages out there to learn, in my opinion. You know, it's also, like I mentioned, extremely popular, ubiquitous, and flexible, which makes it a really hot topic in the market right now. And the reason I chose to dig deeper into Python instead of, say, you know, a JavaScript flavor was because of how much easier I found the syntax, you know, to read and write and generally navigate. So, like, you know, I bet if you really kind of look at these screenshots long enough, you can kind of piece together what's going on and like what's calling what and how it's really working. You know, that's not to say that some people find JavaScript a lot more comfortable to start with than a Python or a Ruby, which I promise is another programming language. You know, I'm not just throwing random object names out there. It really all comes down to preference and value and how your unique brain works, basically. But this game specifically is easily playable in any terminal or command line that runs Python version 3. And in my opinion, the coolest thing about building your own project, whether that be from tutorials or not, is that you have the opportunity to really customize whatever you like. So in this case, I changed very little, if anything at all. But I do have other projects that I built using tutorials that I really enjoyed changing around and kind of adjusting to make my own once I became more comfortable with Python and applying modularity to my work. So that's basically the gist of the journey. You know, I'm happy to discuss anything else and answer any questions you all might have pertaining to your experience or mine. You know, there are no stupid questions, so please do chime in if you have anything you want to ask.
Okay, while we're getting some questions rolling in, I do have a couple just to get the conversation started. So, from your perspective, how can mentorship, especially to empowering Black professionals in tech, how can it like overcome unique challenges that they might be facing, whether that's lack of representation or imposter syndrome?
Well, you know, from my own perspective, I will say that the people that I had met through Bot really kind of opened doors for me that, you know, I'm not really sure that I was going to find as easily elsewhere. For example, you know, Josh and Rodrigue and Emily and Rose, and everybody really kind of on the Bot team were kind of looking out in different places for me that I wasn't really aware. So they were making me more aware of some hurdles that I might face and really kind of helping me to overcome them. And it really sometimes was as simple as like, this is how you want this to look, or this is how you want to present yourself, or this is, how you want to really kind of approach this. Um, or something as big as like, I want you to do this, like I want you to apply to this because I see these opportunities for you, and I'm going to help you open that door. Like I'm going to be there to do that for you, which is really important to do, especially for underrepresented, communities. It's really important to have somebody who's going to advocate for you and who's going to want to be there to open that door for you. So I think it's really, really important to find somebody who wants to represent you and maybe is like you. But of course, you want to you just want to get to know people. You want to network whenever you can.
When it comes to, like, say, for example, beyond like one-on-one mentorship, how can we build a stronger mentorship community as Black professionals in tech?
I think it's really, I'm not going to say it's easy, but I really do just think it's as simple as saying, I see you and I see what you're doing, and I'm just gonna help you. I'm gonna give you the tips. If I have connections, I'm gonna share those connections with you. I'm going to really kind of, like I mentioned, being the person who's going to advocate for, your mentee, on their behalf is super important as well. So it's really just showing up and being like, I want to create this opportunity for you alongside you. So, this is what we're going to do. And they won't always know, the mentee won't always know. So as the mentor, that's your opportunity to be like, I'm going to lead the way. You might not know about these opportunities, but I'm going to be there to really kind of facilitate that experience for you.
Okay. And then I have just one more question, and we're gonna wrap up this live stream. But the last question I have for tonight is, of course, depending on politics and where you're from in the nation, and companies and such, but there are many companies who are still wanting to continue advocating for diversity and inclusion initiatives. Are you able to speak on how mentorship programs can be a key component of a successful DI strategy in the tech industry, especially for companies who are still trying to, um, do what they're supposed to be doing to help us?
Well, I think that is actually a really core piece of the DEI mission, is to create that mentorship pipeline for underrepresented people and communities. Especially if you want to bring in new talent. That's something that it has to be a conscious effort to do that. So, building the community of mentors, of people who want to really kind of set that ladder so that people like, even myself, when I was getting started, I didn't really see that. And when I found bot, I was just thinking, this is great. Like this is a community of people that I feel like I can relate with, and their mission was just, the mission was fantastic. And I think that is, you need concentrated effort, and concentrated, just mission power like that to really create that pipeline and get that DEI, like that energy off the ground to really make that happen. Especially if everybody's still trying to find their way in the corporate world with DEI. I think that is probably, one of the best places to start. There's so much talent out there, new talent, to pick up, young talent too, and whatever, any age, there's talent out there. And I definitely can speak to that. I'm super non-traditional the way that I got into tech as well. And I hadn't just graduated either. Like there's so much talent out there. So I think that is, pivotal.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gabe, for your time tonight. Um, Definitely appreciative and grateful for you. And I'm just so happy and just feel so full to hear about how Black Atlanta Tech, and especially our founders, Josh and Emily and Rose, all those team members who have really helped pave the way for you to get where you are today. But thank you again so much for your time. This wraps up our presentation for tonight, and thank you everyone who was able to join this evening and spending that time with us. I'm sure if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to Gabe if you have questions about what they're doing. If you have additional questions about bot and how we can help you on your journey in the tech industry in any sort of way, you're more than welcome to always text me, email me, find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer you guys' questions. Gabe, did you want to close out with anything?
I just wanted to say, thank you for having me. I'm super grateful, forever grateful to Bot, and very, very happy to continue to be out here with you guys. And I meant to put my contact information. I had that last slide that had it on it, but
Oh, here,
you can go ahead and put it out there. Just if you guys want to grab it real quick.
here you go.
Um,
Here you go.
you're welcome to do that on the way out. Shoot me an email, send me a message, whatever works. Just contact me directly. I'm happy to help and answer any questions that you guys have, and definitely facilitate that pipeline that we were just talking about. Just let me know how I can help.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we're just gonna close out again. My name is Sophia Porter, Executive Director for Black Orlando Tech. For you guys who have enjoyed today's evening, we have 2 events every month. We are located again in Orlando, so we do have a physical event each month, but we also are continuing to have these virtual events as well for people that are in different states and such. So definitely go to our Eventbrite and just search Black Orlando Tech. You'll see all of our events that are coming up. If you also visit our website, there will be a pop up to collect your email address, and that will be the first place to also learn about any new programming and events that are coming your way. And I just also want to just let you guys know, I see there's a few people from different states, so shout out to you guys for joining. But if you're interested in our programming, we have our tech accelerator that is currently open for tech enabled startups and for founders. If you are interested in learning about cloud computing or about Salesforce, we have 2 programming and coming up for cohorts that are going to be opening. Um, cloud, cloud computer will be opening at the end of this month, and then Salesforce is going to be opening in the summer. But also say is that is virtual. Everyone can join. You don't just have to be in the state of Florida to join those programs. So definitely sign up for that email so you could be the first one to know about when that wait list or the application opens for the upskilling programs. But thank you guys again. We're going to go ahead and close out, but I hope everyone has a safe evening and hope to see you at the next event that we will have online or even in person if you're in Orlando. Thank you.